All right. So there are those who say that there is more than meets the eye. Is it about poisonous illicit sugar? Is it about a sugar shortage? There's someone asking, is it a tax evasion matter? What is really happening? And we are seeing different agencies giving different sides of the story, giving contradictory statements.
I think, in my view, I think politicians need to be responsible in this country.
You're speaking as a former politician or as a current one?
No, as a former politician. I'm currently just a private citizen in this country trying to survive. In my view, politicians are doing a lot of damage. Our politicians sometimes develop an anti-business attitude, making irresponsible statements, romanticizing important issues of concern to the Kenyans, to the extent where they do not realize the damage they cause.
Who in particular are you talking about?
Politicians in general. Let me not be specific one, because we know them, we are watching them, we know who, what each one is saying. Character assassination, how is it helping the situation of the sugar farmer or the sugar miller? Closing down factories, because when you raise, when you just come without investigation, and most of our politicians speak with the mouth other than the brain. Sometimes the mouth is faster than the brain. That is something, a statement I can make. And this is dangerous because they can raise an issue without investigation. There is mercury, there is lead, there is what, without any investigation. So you begin wondering, when did a politician subject Cabra sugar, for instance, as I was mentioning, Rai is a major player in the sugar politics in Western Kenya. He's a major investor in Bungoma, in Busia, in Kakamega. If I were any politician there, this is the person I should defend, you know, because the investments there are generating a lot of employment, livelihoods, and things like that, compared to the politicians who are just, shouting without any major contribution, despite having been elected for one reason or other. So there's that problem of politics that has come out, and irresponsible statements, romantic statements that one would wonder, are these meant to ransom, the business people? And if we know the character of our politicians from the statements we hear from anti-corruption authority about them, you begin wondering, are certain claims or statements made so as to ransom business people for profit? That's a question I want to ask. Is
privatization of the sugar sector the solution?
Not necessarily. I used to support privatization.
Everything looks like...
I used to support it.
You used to support it?
Yes. But not necessarily, because Mumias is private. But you know what happened to Mumias? Miwani was private, but we know what happened. So in the end, perhaps it's a question of just management. Good management, the way the private sugar sector have done. West Kenya, Butali, Kibos, Transmara. These are private players in the sugar industry. And you notice they make profit. If they are making profit from the same market, how come the state mills are not making profit? Of course, the state mills now come around to say, oh, these people have no sugarcane of their own, they are poaching our sugarcane. Now, if they are poaching, what are you doing about? Why aren't you milling that cane? Why have you left that cane? Because these fellows, in terms of the efficiency, they pay. West Kenya pays their farmers within about 7 days. West Kenya provides inputs to their farmers. Same for Butali, same for Transmara and places like those ones. But the state mills, like as I say, I'm contracted, I'm loyal to Nzoia Sugar Company, which is where I send my sugar. But I'm not paid since March. And at my level, as I say, I'm not saying that I'm big, but just at my humble level.
Surely, 4 months later.
Yes.
Well, you say that they are private, and you talked about Mumias, for example, but we have had CEOs saying that they cannot operate there without interference, that they get phone calls, there's political interference, because these factories are in certain areas and they deal with a big percentage of the population, and of course there's public participation, etc. As a former Kenya Sugar Board chairperson, during your tenure, were you able to carry out what you wanted to do without interference? Did you receive calls at night telling you this is the way to go, that's the way to go?
As I said, sugar is a political crop because of its encompassing of a large mass of farmers. When you are a politician, those are votes. So it makes it political. So as a politician, you deal with the mill within your area. as a government bureaucrat who licenses, you know, in charge of licenses. For instance, when it comes to imports where there is a problem of abuse of the import regime, sometime early 2011, 12, 13, 14 there. Or let me put it this way, Wahiga. If you look at the import regulations, they have been changed several times. And why have they been changed? Who stand to benefit from those changes of the import regime?
Fair enough. And you are making an interesting point, but you still haven't answered my question. When you were you're getting there.
I'm getting the issue because you're asking if we are getting phone calls. I'm simply telling you, instead of a phone call, a regulation is changed. And you are at the sugar board. Sometimes the regulation is made without your input. Because your input as at Sugar Directorate or AFA is clear. You have these regulations, as I say, last year. The open window had no quantitative restrictions. It had no restriction the type of sugar anybody was to import. So this pushed out the regulator. Isn't that just
because now it was, in a sense, all open? Open. You can import as much as you want to?
No type, no nothing. So now, which brings in the issue of quality. So how do you assure the quality? And I've told you, if it's to follow the regulations laid out at, by AFA, there is pre-inspection, certificate of health conformity at the port of origin of the sugar and then at the port of entry, let's say Mombasa. But now, when you have no role and yet you are aware that Kenya has porous borders, the border of Kenya with the Somalia is notorious. You are aware.
Notorious for what? For sugar?
For sugar, filtering into Kenya.
Coming from where? Not from
Kismayo. Let me explain to you.
Okay, go ahead.
It's important that we raise this issue. There have been journalists who have done investigative reports that sugar has been smuggled from Somalia. At one time, 15,000 bags of sugar daily were entering Kenya. 15,000 bags of sugar daily. There also have been reports by the UN monitoring group that in fact sugar was filtering in from the port of through the port of Kismayo into Kenya.
Did those reports say the point of origin? Is it Somalia
the point of origin of the sugar is Brazil via Saudi Arabia via United Arab Emirates. So that sugar arrives through Kismayo, then the porous Somali-Kenya border, and you find that sugar in Italy. So could this be the kind of sugar that is contaminated that we are talking about?
Because it has not gone through any tests.
No tests.
Through a porous border.
Not at all. This UN report, monitoring report, was issued 2013. Anybody can check UN monitoring report 2013, and the Institute of Defense Analysis, the US, also issued a report 2014. These reports emphasize the charcoal trade, and I'm sure the journalists you are aware of the so-called charcoal trade and the sugar trade. You remember, I'm not going to mention names because now it becomes a dangerous area of the people, Kenyans who are in Somalia, and they were claimed to be engaged in this business.
Well, we thought they were going there to fight terrorism.
Exactly. The Kenya government vociferously denied this report. I recall Governor Alfred Mutua really rubbished those reports when he was the government spokesman. Even the journalist, Kwamacheshi, and the journalist for justice, a report of 2015, he argued that Kenyans were also engaged in that sugar trade. So there's enough evidence to point that that porous border has been filtering in sugar, has been allowing sugar to get in, and there's something in Somali called paraksat, you know, something that a bribe. I think it's, I don't know if it's Somali or whichever.
That's the word you use to camouflage a bribe.
Yes.
I want to interrupt you because I want to read some SMSs here.
Yes.
Let me see here. You don't give us your name, but you say, please go and visit the Chemelil Sugar Company and see the effect of imported sugar on the mill. Yeah. Workers who, like farmers, have not been paid for 11 months. Security will soon become a major concern. The government is bailing Mumias private and leaving Chemelil state to collapse. Let me read one more. Ask Busolo, if truly the sugar was imported, blended in Kenya and repackaged, why should factories claim it is a product of Kenya on the shelves which is in itself unlawful, it should be marked the country of origin.
Yes.
So the packet should say country of origin, Brazil. Imported, I don't know through which countries. Repackaged by this factory. Not what we are seeing in the supermarket as local brands.
Correct. In fact, that's what I'm saying. The regulations are clear. Let's talk about...
But they keep being changed, is also what you're saying.
But there's also an abuse. Abuse is, there's no doubt about it. Because in repackaging is not illegal, the way some of our fellows are putting it out in the middle. Repackaging is legal to the extent that if you repackaging sugar, the way you, I think that whoever that gentleman or lady put it correctly, you state the origin of sugar. This sugar is from Brazil, manufactured that year. It expires this year, repackaged by Saulo Busolo Wahiga, you know.
For example.
Exactly. That's the rule.
I want to get in 2 quick questions for you. If you saw things going wrong in your tenure as a chairperson of the Kenya Sugar Board, did you raise the alarm?
Yes, with the ministry.
Maybe you could have saved us then.
No, we did.
You did.
As I said, the regulations, I'm telling you, they are very clear.
No, even then you said, wait, I'm seeing a problem, and you
the problem that was there, which is yet to be solved, is the sugar general regulations. I joined Sugar Board about 2002, and Sugar Board was disbanded about 2013. Around 2003 is when we created this import regime. You remember those days during elections, there will be a lot of shiploads of sugar. But when the Sugar Act came into being and we joined it as directors, we regulated imports.
You sought to regulate
imports. Then we sought also to regulate the regime of sugar production, sugarcane production, through what was called as sugar general regulations. That's something I've never understood up to now, never been gazetted by the ministry. And that perhaps could explain the chaos in the industry. The gentleman about Muhoroni, you know, as I say, people like bashing imports. No, as I say, imports are legal. This issue of defense of an industry from competition, you know, doesn't make sense to me. Let the industry be efficient and compete like anybody else. If there are any restrictions, let them be restrictions that are market-oriented, not restrictions that make the product more expensive. The problem in Chemel is mismanagement. Let's not run away from. The managers of state mills have really mismanaged. By 2014, the government had pumped about 21 billion shillings in infrastructure development, factory rehabilitations, but what the managers do, a part, let's say, let me put it this way so that you understand, so Higa. If you go to West Kenya Finance Department probably has about 9 people.
9 accountants. Okay.
Zoya Sugar Company has 100. If you go to Kipo Sugar, people. Yes, Finance Department may have 5 people. Chemeli has 200. You know, what are these people doing that Kipos and West Kenya is not doing? Procurement. A part that costs in West Kenya buys at 20 shillings. Zoya is buying it at 10 million. A part that Kibos or Transmara buys at 5 shillings. Chemelil is buying at 70 million. So how can they survive? So it's a question of management, really. It's not a question of saying that imports. No, imports should not be an excuse. They have their own issues, but surely they should not be an excuse. So that's why even earlier on when we started, and you're wondering, is imports a conflict of interest? No. In Tanzania, for instance, I think even currently, the government has allowed imports to come in. And in Tanzania, it's the millers that bring in the imports. Why? Because they understand the deficiency and they bring in the quantities that they knew they were to produce, but they are unable to produce for one reason or other.
Fair enough. Where do we go from here?
Where we go from here, I think
solution. You've raised multiple issues that ail the sugar sector.
I have. One, our politicians should be responsible. Let them not stray the investments of private mills. The government is struggling. The big four business. Sugar is part of the manufacturing. Sugar is part of agro-processing. Sugar is part of industrialization. Government has not invested in, for instance, in Western Kenya for a long time. The only tradable agricultural item, and if we're talking of a market economy, surely you must have tradable elements. The only tradable good in Western Kenya is sugar cane, the sugar industry. If for one reason politicians become irresponsible, call for closure of this, attach character assassinate West Kenya, character assassinate Butali or Kibos or whatever, and these are the only private players who have invested in their area, then they are destroying the livelihoods of
What is the
people.
danger of banning imports? Many see that as a solution, and I've seen MPs, including Honorable Gladys Wanga, saying, ban imports, let's look for local solutions here.
You know, I went to school in Tanzania, and there used to be something called political education. Our MPs also need to be literate without abusing anybody. A good number of our MPs, as I said, speak with their mouth and not their brains. They need information. As I said, the sugar industry is complex. It's not subject to normal economics.
So Kenya can never be sufficient on its own because...
As I said, I give you an example. 1970 it was.
You said for a couple of years.
Yes,
or a year
it was. So it's possible. And in fact, if you look at the current moment, the private sector portion of the sugar industry is slightly more now than the government sector.
Okay.
So with the efficiency of that private sector investment, we're heading to that self-sufficiency, in my view.
Okay.
But that self-sufficiency also requires good political atmosphere. But if we now make investors invest more in political monitoring, what the MP is going to say, what the MP is going to, to do, then instead of spending money on expansion of their, mills, they are going to spend more money. And MPs are rent seekers. They want money for politics. They want money to assuage their voters and things like that. I think that's where the danger is. So for me, the danger for the sugar industry is the politicians. That is what I will say.
Speaking as a former politician.
In terms of what's going on,
yes,
there's something that if the sugar is bad, it can be recalled. We read sometimes Toyota company, if something is wrong with their car, they recall. So I think regulations will come into being where if there's a problem with sugar that is contaminated, you recall.
Okay.
That's what I could say.
Those are the views of Saulo Busolo, former chairperson, Kenya Sugar Board. He's also a former parliamentarian, Webuye. Thank you so much.